This presentation will help you write effective persuasive essays. The presentation will cover the persuasive context, the role of the audience, what to research and cite, and how to establish your credibility. So let's start by asking, what is persuasive writing? Persuasive writing seeks to convince its readers to embrace the point of view presented by appealing to the audience's reason and understanding through argument and/or entreaty. Now, we encounter persuasion every day through TV commercials, letters to the editor, junk mail, magazine ads, and even college brochures. Now, can you think of any other persuasive contexts? I know for myself, as a mother and a daughter, as a daughter, I employed plenty of persuasive strategies trying to get what I want from my parents. But also, I see my daughter at a very young age starting to really lay on the pathos, aka emotional appeal, to get what she wants. Here are the steps for effective persuasion. Understand your audience. Support your opinion. Know the various sides of your issue. Respectfully address other points of view. Find common ground with your audience. And establish your credibility. Now, trying to understand your audience, you want to ask these type of questions. Who is your audience? What's their knowledge level or interests? What beliefs do they hold about your topic? And this is when it comes really handy to look back to pathos, ethos, and logos, and really try to find the right type of evidence that will appeal to your audience's beliefs. What disagreements might arise between you and your audience? And how can you refute counter-arguments with respect? Also ask, what concerns does your audience face? Do they have limited funds to distribute? For example, if you're talking about trying to get someone to take action, for example, to support the arts. Do they feel the topic directly affects them? So with this example, do they feel that the arts is a much needed aspect of the human condition? And then also think about how much time do they have to consider your essay? Help your audience relate to your topic, and of course appeal to their hearts as well as their minds. So in terms of the spectrum of pathos, logos, and ethos, this is when you want to use all three appeals. Use anecdotes when appropriate. An anecdote is just a brief story. Paint your topic with plenty of detail and involve the reader's senses in these sections. This is also called sensory imagery, using the 5 senses to give descriptions. You may have used it in your 101 class, maybe writing a narrative or a descriptive essay. Now, when you're researching an issue, you want to make sure that you become familiar with all sides of the issue. Find common ground. Understand the history of the topic. Predict the counter-arguments your audience might have, and find strong support for your own perspective. Now, here's an example of finding common ground with your audience. You might support a war, whereas your audience may not. The common ground would be that both sides want to see troops come home. Also predict counter-arguments. And here's another example. Organic produce from local farmers markets is better than store-bought produce. Now, the opposition, as many of you may have, is that organic produce is just too expensive. So here's a possible counter-argument. Organic produce is higher in nutritional value than store-bought produce and is free of pesticides, making it a better value. Also, store-bought produce travels thousands of miles, and the cost of gasoline affects the prices of food on supermarket shelves. So as you can see from this argument, they're changing this sort of notion of value. And also, they would probably bring up later in the essay that the more people that buy organic produce, the cheaper the price will eventually get. Now, in terms of supporting your perspective, always make sure you appeal to the audience's reason. using statistics and reputable studies. Now keep in mind, this is when you're using logos or logical reasoning. Cite experts on the topic. Do they back up what you say? Do they refute the other side? This is what you call ethos, credibility. Now, you want to make sure that you use legitimate sources. So let's take a look at these questions. Which source would a reader find more credible? The New York Times or myopinion.com? Well, hopefully you said the New York Times. The New York Times is a reputable news source, whereas my opinion, you're not going to be sure who's giving those opinions. Let's look at the next question. Which person would a reader be more likely to believe? Joe Smith from Fort Wayne, Indiana, or Dr. Susan Wirth, professor of criminology at Purdue University? Hopefully you said Dr. Wirth. If you think about it, you can compare this to getting feedback on your essays. Hopefully that you will take the professor's feedback with more clout, so to speak, than a peer's. Now, when it comes to establishing your own credibility, you want to make sure that you have a very polished, professional paper. So make sure you cite credible sources, you cite sources correctly and thoroughly, use professional language and design, meaning is your formatting all correct, and also edit out any errors. You also want to make sure you cite your sources ethically. Again, this will help you build credibility. Don't misinterpret a quote or leave out important information. Here's an example. Crime rates were down by 2002, according to Dr. Smith. Where the actual quote actually says, crime rates were down by 2002, but steadily began climbing again a year later, said Dr. Smith. So as you see, if you leave out half this sentence, it changes the meaning completely. Here are some tactics to avoid to make sure that the reader really wants to understand your perspective. Don't lecture or talk down to the audience. Don't make threats or bully your reader. Don't employ guilt trips. This means don't lay on the pathos too strongly, aka emotional appeal. And also be careful if using the second person you. Now, I do require that you use third person in your academic essays, so this shouldn't be a problem. But if you think about it, you is a word used usually to give direction. You need to finish your essay by this time. However, when you're talking about changing someone's perspective, you want to make sure that the person feels that they're changing their perspective on their own, not because they're being persuaded to by the paper. So really, your persuasive essay's purpose is to present information for the reader to digest using maybe some tools in terms that we talked about. However, make sure that you don't overdo it. I hope this presentation helped, and I'll talk to you in the discussion board.